Hey there, hobby friends. I'm Jared, and this is Caffeinated Miniatures. Thanks for hanging out with me today. When I picked up the Crimson Court set from Warhammer Underworlds, I was fully intent on painting up Prince Deval with that box art red armor. However, I was cruising through YouTube one evening, as you do, when the good old algorithm recommended a 52 miniatures video from a couple years ago. Now, I always appreciate Alex's ability to craft a story, as well as his approach to painting concepts. And this black armor video was no exception. Now, I've linked that video in the description. Be sure to check it out if you haven't already. All this to say, I was inspired to try my hand at some black armor. Maybe turn Prince Deval into Darth Vampire? Appropriately, I primed the prince with black and started the painting. As the skin would have been difficult to access if areas around it were painted, I started there. I decided to go with a fairly purple toned skin. Shocking, I know. So I mixed some purple, black, and ivory to create the deepest shadow color. After covering the whole of the skin with this, I mixed in more and more ivory to build the volumes and highlights. Finally adding a little cold white for the very brightest points of light. Next up was the crux of the model, and this video. Highlighting the black just enough to keep it looking black. I started off with highly diluted deep sea blue. More or less following the highlights created by my lamp, I began glazing in some of the blue. Making sure to keep a significant amount of black showing. And working based on the idea that the armor would look darker next to brighter highlights, I added incrementally more cold white to smaller areas. Then to kind of unify these highlights, I carefully glazed in some ice yellow. Then in any areas where I felt like there wasn't quite enough black, I diluted some black and slowly glazed it back in. At this point, I was not too confident in where this was going, but I pushed through, hoping that this was just the point in the process where the mini just kinda looks like garbage. Following up the black armor with more armor, I started in on the gold bits. Beginning with flat earth, I covered all but the deepest recesses and shadows. Then I diluted it down to a glaze consistency, using it to mask the transition and add a hint of color to those darkest areas. Once that was dry, I went back in with medium flesh tone, mimicking the previous steps, covering much less area. I like to use medium flesh tone for gold. It's got this great ochre-y kind of gold tone that just works great for midtones for gold. Then I mixed ice yellow to the medium flesh tone, about 50-50, again copying the previous steps, covering far less area. Finally, using straight ice yellow for the brightest highlights. I decided that this gold wasn't quite there, so I diluted yellow ink fairly heavily, using it as a filter to slowly bring in some more yellow. For the bags and pouches at his back, I wanted to break up all the blue and black, so I went for a dark brown leather. After slapping some mahogany brown on there, I decided it wasn't quite dark enough, so I mixed in black, darkening it considerably, and heavily diluted the mix, glazing in the color until I was happy with the resulting base. To build those volumes, I built back up to mahogany brown, finishing by adding some ivory for the final highlights. After slapping some blue-grays at the sword in a very slapdash NMM, I moved on to the cape cloak thing. I opted for some more purple. Not surprising, I realize, but I felt like it tied in nicely with the flesh. For the deepest shadow color, I created a dark, desaturated hue by mixing black and purple. After covering all the area, I began working back up to straight purple, using quick, sketchy brush strokes. Adding some ice yellow for the brightest highlights. Create some reflecty red gems. And all that remained was the hair. Admittedly, I painted the hair twice. The first time was really quick and fairly poor effort. After leaving it for a few minutes, I decided I just couldn't live with it and redid it. For the base, I followed my process for Haskell Hexbane with Black Templar over Elfic Flesh, plus a little dry brushing. Add a tuft or two and here's a result. Well, there we go, my first attempt at black armor. And I think it mostly reads as black, although there's certainly some areas that work much better than others. But that's why we put the reps in. Ultimately, the way to get better is to suck first. At least, I hope so. I don't do any practice models for these videos. I show my first attempt walking through my process and thoughts. And hopefully we can all improve through my mistakes. If you made it this far, you are an absolute legend. While you're here, hit that like button, subscribe, and do all the things. Thanks for watching. You are awesome. And I'll see you in the next one.